Once upon a time in history, films contained no sound. That means there weren't any sound effects or dialogue accompanying the visuals. Yes, no voice dubbing, voiceover, or sound effects were added to the film. For the modern generation, this may be hard to comprehend. Interestingly, the concept of combining sound and visuals was not necessarily a foreign concept to film studios. In fact, one could say it's as old as film itself. But because of the major technical difficulties involved, the films remained silent till the late 1920s. The period before the transition into sound was known as the silent era. One may ask, if there was no sound, how could you tell what the actors were saying? Just like a typical sci-fi film would provide us with the exposition by use of titles at the beginning of a film, silent films would make use of the same method. Instead, they would place the titles between the dialogue. These titles are commonly referred to as the intertitles. Intertitles at a point became graphic elements containing abstract art or illustrations. They would describe the action or enhance the film's atmosphere or mood. The title writer was a significant crew member in the silent era and was separate from the scenario writer of the film. Sound enhanced the art of film. Later, silent films were replaced by talking pictures, or talkies as they would call them. Many of the film traditionalists were not fans of this change, as they believed this transition had a negative impact on the aesthetic quality of films. The gradually degrading quality was not due to sound. Often the films were adapted for television, and they may have been extracted from a generation of copies which were from damaged stock. They would end up being played at incorrect speeds, accompanied by inharmonious music. The modern audience has expressed how they find silent films to be boring. Some film geeks have expressed their distaste for silent films. They only watch them for educational purposes. It could be due to the seemingly shallow stories, extended scenes where nothing significant happens, as well as the exaggerated acting, or simply the lack of dialogue and sound effects, which would normally add dimension to a story. However, during the silent era, people considered them masterpieces. What is my take on silent films? Well, I believe people judge them from a close-up. Let's pull the camera back and have a look at the wider shot. You must probably be thinking it must have been extremely awkward to sit in a cinema where the only thing audible was the shuffling of popcorn and the sounds of people making out. Surprisingly, it wasn't as awkward as you think. An in-house musician or musicians would often play to a score. In the primitive years of silent films, the score was improvised. But later, as film advanced, scores with a specific cue sheet were provided to the cinemas. Some composers would manipulate certain instruments to sound like sound effects. This added dimension to the films, as it helped identify the mood, atmosphere, and feeling in a scene. In Japan, films grew to have a benshi, which was a narrator who voiced over the film or provided character voices. Yes, the irony is that the silent films contained an adequate measure of music. This must have been a great experience. I would have killed just to experience watching a silent film within these circumstances. It must have been a thrilling experience. Another interesting aspect was the acting. The term exaggerated would not be an appropriate description when describing the performances. Rather, I would say there was great emphasis on the body language and facial expressions. This would seem like a logical approach. Think of modern music videos that contain no dialogue. The actors in the music videos often have to place emphasis on their actions to communicate the message clearly. Silent films were shot differently to sound films. The acting, combined with the low rate the film was shot at, provided these jerky, comical performances, which is probably why most of the popular silent films today tend to be the comedies. I believe it would be a challenge to perform in a silent drama, as the actor would require a high degree of skill to act out the subtlety. It would be interesting to see an actor such as Ryan Gosling, who is a master in this field, attempt to pull this off. There were plenty of silent films which were produced. Most of them will remain a mystery as they were lost. I was reading a list of lost films. I came across an interesting title which reminded me of a modern film, The Great Gatsby. It would be very interesting to witness a silent version of this film. The production of silent films decreased shortly after sound was introduced. What impact did this have on the film industry? Let's take a look at what the atmosphere was like on set during the silent era. At first, we are introduced to a noisy environment, which may be a contrast to what we had in mind.
Maids off?
Yeah.
Come with me.
Because films contain no sound, multiple scenes or films were shot at once. As mentioned in the previous segment, this was convenient for the major studios as it lowered the costs. Another interesting fact is that orchestras would perform a score while the scenes were being shot. Although the music would not be captured, it enhanced the atmosphere and assisted the actors in expressing their characters' feelings and actions accordingly. This must have been a pleasant time for directors, as they could instruct, shout, and curse without their words ever affecting the scene. Let's compare the shooting on set to the final product. Notice how the absence of sound affects the atmosphere. The interesting thing about the ancient film era was how every moment was crucial. The crew and the talent had a specific time frame where they needed to capture a specific moment, as film wasn't as technologically advanced. This made the moments even more special.
Action!
Got it, fire! Everyone run!
Don't stop the camera! Keep rolling! Keep rolling! Say Voltaire!
Cannon!
We're crying! Now laugh in embarrassment! Now look at Miss Moore! You're trying to hide the shame! Hold steady! You're trying to be strong! You're trying to bury the pain! But you can't hold back that one final tear!
The transition into sound wasn't as smooth as one would think. Let's take a look at a couple of challenges the crew and talent faced on set. Take note of a complete silence. Ironically, it's a contrast to what we'd hear on a silent film set.
Scene 17.
The crew had to find new ways to give the actors direction during the shooting of a scene.
And action.
Scenes were shot indoors as this was more convenient for the audio equipment. Everything on set was much more intense. Even the most subtle sounds would affect the audio. There was less room for improvisation and error. Everything had to be precise.
Hello, college!
What happened? She blew the valves. I just need a minute. All right, well, hurry.
Constant errors resulted in numerous retakes. Different scenes could not be shot simultaneously, and multiple lighting equipment was needed because they were shooting indoors. This increased the studio's budget. Even the experienced actors found it hard to adapt.
All right, places, everyone.
There were constant fights on set.
Well, hello, college.
Motherfucker! All right, everybody, eyes on me! Any other faggots?
I'm sorry, you're alternating the pitch of your voice too much. The ideals.
Lloyd, fuck off. Fuck off. I listen to my fucking director, not the fucking sound guy.
Who the fuck?
Crew members were forced to endure terrible conditions. But when everything came together, a new age of cinema was born.
Action. Hello, college. Hello? Hi, this is Joanne from 31 Grace Hall. I was just gonna see if the phone worked. Who is this? You don't say, the dean. Well, how you doing? It's a nice campus you got here. So, what's a girl supposed to do once she's here? Sure, classes, but ain't you got any parties? Not till the evening, huh? All right, I can handle that. I'm from Granville, Ohio, so I know quiet. Thanks a bunch, Dean. See you later. Nice fella. Wonder if he's single. Cut! Okay, check the gate!
Billy, check the gate!
But for every 10th of a victory, 9 losses were
Get a
suffered.
crowbar, I got a little. Come on, get me, hurry up. Oh my God.
He's dead.
Sound films affected many filmmakers and actors' careers. This period was also the beginning of the Great Depression. I will dive deeper into this topic in the next segment by taking a look at Brad Pitt's character, Jack Conrad, whose career takes a drastic turn.